There is a place where the line between the living and the dead is not just blurred, it is erased. A place where the walls don't just hold memories, they scream them. And the most terrifying question you can ask isn't if it's haunted, but why. Hello and welcome. I want to tell you a story, but this isn't just a story. It's a warning, whispered from the shadows of a place that history has tried to forget. If you're new here, and you have the courage to peer into the darkness that lingers just beyond the corner of your eye, then consider subscribing. But only if you dare to face the truths that wait in the silence. Tonight's tale is not born from campfire folklore or the imagination of a novelist. Every word you are about to hear is anchored in documented evidence, in police reports, in sworn testimonies, and in the cold, hard data of the real world. And by the end, you will be forced to ask yourself a question that has no safe answer. Is this haunted motel really possessed? Our story doesn't begin with a ghost. It begins with a building. A 14-story monument to transients looming over the corner of South Main Street and 7th in Los Angeles. When it opened its doors in 1927, it was called the Cecil Hotel. It was meant to be a beacon of luxury, a destination for wealthy businessmen and starlets dreaming of Hollywood fame. But its grandeur was a mask, and it would not stay on for long. The Great Depression shattered the illusion. The Cecil's fortunes plummeted, and its purpose twisted. It became a place for those on the edge of society, a last-stop motel offering weekly and monthly rates for those with nowhere else to go. It was this shift, this descent from glamour into grim reality, that seemed to open a door, and something from the other side stepped through. The statistics alone are enough to curdle the blood. The Los Angeles Police Department, over the decades, began referring to the Cecil Hotel unofficially as a suicide mission. According to their own records and coroner's reports, the building became a magnet for the most profound human despair. The first documented suicide occurred in 1931, just 4 years after its grand opening, when a guest named W.K. Norton checked in and swallowed a bottle of poison. It was a grim preview of a relentless pattern. In 1939, a former Navy officer, Irwin C. Neblett, jumped from a 9th-floor window, landing on the roof of a parked car. His reason was listed as business failure. The falls continued. In 1940, a woman named Dorothy Seeger leaped from a window. In 1944, a fireman named Benjamin Doddick jumped to his death. In 1947, another woman, this time unnamed in the papers, chose the same exit. But the most infamous of these early jumps came from a room on the 5th floor. Pigeon Goldie Osgood was a kindly, eccentric woman known for feeding the pigeons in Pershing Square. In 1962, she was found brutally murdered in her room. She had been stabbed, sexually assaulted, and bludgeoned with a toilet tank lid. Her killer was never found. The violence was escalating. The building was no longer just a witness to sadness. It was becoming an active participant. The 1960s bled into the 70s and 80s, and the Cecil's reputation solidified into something truly sinister. It became a haven for some of the most notorious predators in American history. It was a place where you could disappear, and many did. The police records from this era are a catalog of horror. In 1964, a woman named Pauline Otten got into an argument with her husband. She fled their room and, in a state of panic, jumped from a 7th-floor window. She didn't land on the street. She landed on an elderly pedestrian, George Giannini, killing them both. 2 lives, extinguished in an instant, their fates intertwined by the architecture of the Cecil. But the true monster was yet to reveal himself. In the mid-1980s, a man named Richard Ramirez, the infamous Night Stalker, lived at the Cecil for weeks during his reign of terror across Los Angeles. He would return to his cheap room, its walls thin and stained, after a night of murder and mayhem. He would sleep there, surrounded by the souvenirs of his crimes, his presence soaking into the very fabric of the building. He was not the only one. In the early 1990s, an Austrian serial killer named Jack Unterweger, a man who wrote poetry and styled himself as an intellectual, stayed at the Cecil while on a journalistic assignment. During his stay, 3 women were murdered in the area, their deaths mirroring his previous MO. He was later convicted of those murders. Two of the most vicious serial killers of the 20th century, independently of one another, chose the Cecil Hotel as their base of operations. Coincidence is a comfortable lie we tell ourselves in the dark. But what if the building itself attracted that kind of darkness? What if it fed on it? This is the point where skeptics might scoff. They might say a building is just brick and mortar, glass and steel, cannot be evil, cannot be possessed. But then you have to account for the accounts that defy all rational explanation. The documented testimonies of those who stayed there, who worked there, who tried to manage the unmanageable. Former night auditors would speak of hearing phantom footsteps pacing the empty hallways on the upper floors. Guests would report the sound of children laughing in rooms that had been vacant for days. Doors would unlock themselves. Lights would flicker in a specific rhythmic pattern like a distress signal. The elevator, a relic from a bygone era, was a particular focal point. Countless reports state that it would travel to floors no one had pressed, its doors opening to reveal empty, dark corridors. It would refuse to go to certain floors, like the 14th, which was notoriously avoided by staff. Maintenance workers, the most pragmatic of people, would tell stories of tools going missing, only to be found later in places they had already checked. Of a pervasive, icy cold that would settle in certain rooms, a cold that no heater could ever dispel. These are not the ramblings of imaginative ghost hunters. These are the consistent, repeated complaints logged in the hotel's own ledgers and in the statements given to journalists and investigators over the years. Something was wrong with the Cecil, deeply, fundamentally wrong. And then, in 2013, the world was forced to look directly into the heart of this mystery. It began on January 31st, when a 21-year-old Canadian student named Elisa Lam checked into the Cecil. She was bright, vivacious, and battling bipolar disorder, a fact her family would later confirm. She was traveling alone, and her last communication was a blog post expressing excitement about her trip. Then, she vanished. Her parents reported her missing. The LAPD launched an investigation. They searched the hotel. They interviewed guests and staff. They found nothing. Elisa Lam had seemingly disappeared into thin air within the confines of the Cecil Hotel. Weeks passed. Then, guests began complaining about the water. It was coming out of the taps a strange, dark color. The pressure was low, and it had a foul, inexplicable taste. On February 19, 2013, a maintenance worker named Santiago Lopez was sent to investigate the hotel's water tanks on the roof. These are massive, 4-foot-high cylindrical tanks that hold the building's water supply. He climbed a ladder to the top of one of them and pushed open the heavy lid. And what he saw inside would haunt him for the rest of his life. Floating naked and submerged in the water was the body of Elisa Lam. The discovery sent shockwaves around the world. How did she get there? The roof was access-controlled. The door was alarmed. The ladder to the tank was steep and difficult to climb. The lid was heavy, requiring significant strength to open. And the water inside was ice-cold. The official cause of death was listed as an accidental drowning, with her bipolar disorder cited as a contributing factor. It was a tragic but seemingly closed case. But then, the LAPD released a piece of evidence that would tear the case wide open and plunge it directly into the realm of the supernatural. They released security footage from the hotel's elevator, taken on the night Elisa disappeared. The video is, without exaggeration, one of the most disturbing and widely viewed pieces of footage ever to emerge from a real-world investigation. It shows Elisa Lam entering the elevator. She appears anxious, on edge. She presses multiple buttons. The elevator doors do not close. She peers out into the hallway, her body language suggesting she is hiding from someone or something. She then retreats into the corner of the elevator, seeming to press herself into the wall, out of sight of the doorway. Her hands move in strange, intricate gestures. She appears to be having a conversation with an entity that is not there. At one point, she steps out of the elevator and adopts a posture that can only be described as a defensive crouch, as if waiting to pounce or to flee. Then, she walks away, out of frame, and is never seen alive again. The elevator doors finally close and operate normally, Every expert who examined the tape was baffled. The elevator's behavior was mechanically inexplicable. Elisa's behavior was psychologically inexplicable. It was as if she was trapped in a game whose rules only she could see, played against an opponent that remained forever in the shadows. The internet erupted with theories. Had she been followed? Was she having a psychotic episode? Or was she, as many began to believe, reacting to a presence that the camera could not capture? Digital analysts dissected the video frame by frame. Some claimed to see a shadowy figure reflected in the elevator's polished interior. Others pointed out that the pattern of buttons she pressed allegedly spelled out a word or a code. The most chilling theory of all came from those who noted the grim history of the Cecil. They asked a simple, terrifying question. Had the building itself taken her? The elevator, a known focal point of paranormal activity, had behaved erratically, refusing to close its doors, as if holding her in place. Had it delivered her to something? The roof access, though alarmed, had a history of malfunctions. Was it merely a coincidence that her body was found in the water supply, the lifeblood of the building? Or was it a symbolic offering? The coroner found no drugs in her system that would explain her behavior. Her toxicology report was clean. The official explanation felt insufficient. It failed to account for the feeling the video evokes, a primal sense of dread, of a human being caught in a trap that is both physical and profoundly spiritual. The story of Elisa Lam and the Cecil Hotel is a nexus point where cold, hard facts collide with the inexplicable. It is a case file number. It is a coroner's report. It is a publicly released security tape. It is also a feeling, a deep and unsettling suspicion that the world is not as orderly as we want to believe. The building still stands, though it has been renovated and rebranded, an attempt to scrub away its past. But you cannot renovate a soul. You cannot rebrand a shadow. The documented history is too heavy, too saturated with pain and mystery. The sheer volume of death, the concentration of evil in the form of its most infamous residents, the countless small, unnerving events reported by credible witnesses, they form a pattern that is impossible to ignore. Is the Cecil Hotel haunted? The evidence suggests that hauntings are not just about ghosts in the traditional sense. They are about resonance. They are about a location absorbing the energy of the events that transpire within it, until that energy becomes self-sustaining, a feedback loop of tragedy and fear. Is it possessed? Possession implies a single, controlling intelligence. But what if the possession is more like a disease? A spiritual sickness that infects all who enter, amplifying their darkest impulses, their deepest fears, their most tragic vulnerabilities. Richard Ramirez's evil was his own. Jack Unterweger's malice was his own. Elisa Lam's struggle was her own. But the Cecil Hotel provided the stage. It set the scene, turned the key. So the next time you find yourself in a lonely place, a place that feels old and tired and heavy with silence, listen closely. You might not hear a ghost. You might just hear the building itself breathing and waiting for its next guest.